has been going through a very tough situation. In this pandemic situation, our life has completely changed. It also has very serious impact on our daily lives. Still, we are trying to continue all our academic activities through this virtual platform. Now, without any further delay, we are going to start our 9th technical session of the 2 days international webinar. Today, the English Department of Rishi Bankim Chandra Evening College, in collaboration with the English Department of Rishi Bankim Chandra Day College, have jointly hosted 2 days long international webinar on English literature from the margins of class, caste, race, and gender. In this session, we have the paper presentation of profound HEI faculty, research scholar, PhD students, and independent researchers. So, yeah, sir has joined. Okay. So I hope this interactive session will be very much enriching. Now I would like to request the chairpersons, Dr. Srijanee Roy, Assistant Professor of RBC College, and Professor Debdeep Banerjee, Department of English of RBC College, to chair the session. I would like to request them to begin the session with their delightful speeches. Now I hand over the session to Professor Debdeep Banerjee to proceed. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome you all in this webinar. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Srijanee Roy to chair the session.
Ma'am, you are not audible.
Okay.
Yeah.
It is, for a technologically challenged person like me, it is very difficult to sit at home and manage so many things like a laptop and a phone and a camera and, do things properly. I'm very sorry. So welcome everyone who is around here. Thank you, Professor Banerjee. Thank you, Rinkita, for the welcome address. So this is the 9th session of the international webinar on English literature from the margins of class, caste, race, and gender. Now, as this is a very comprehensive, area that we are talking about, we have got in presentations, we have got in papers, which covers an extensive area of research. So, without any further delay, I'll be handing over the mic to the next speaker. But I need to just remind the presenters of a technical thing. That is, since there are so many presenters and so many parallel sessions going on, we are very constrained in terms of time. So 8 minutes have been allotted to each of the speakers to complete the presentation, and on my own part, I will be interrupting you at 6th minute in order to remind you of the remaining time. So I apologize beforehand for the inconvenience that I would be causing. So now I'll welcome the first speaker, Pousali Sarkar. She is an MA English 3rd SEM student from Rishi Bankim Chandra College, Naihati. And the title of her paper reads, Emergence of Bengali Dalit Women Writers, Writing, Publication, Translation, and Proclamation and Overview. So over to you, Pousali. Are you here?
Sorry, ma'am, she is not here. She is not yet joined.
She has not really yet joined. So can we have then Priyadarshini Sengupta? Is she around?
Yes, she was there.
Okay. If Priyadarshini can join in and make herself visible, maybe?
Yes, ma'am, I am here.
Okay. Can you just put on your camera so that we can see you?
Yes. I'm trying to do it.
Okay. No problem. So are you ready with your presentation? Then we'll call you for, okay, there is Priyadarshini. So we basically welcome Priyadarshini Sengupta, BA Honours English, 3rd SEM student from Rishi Bankim Chandra Evening College. And the title of her paper reads, Terminal Polarization in Post-Colonial Literature. Okay, over to you, Priyadarshini. Please rest.
I'm starting the marginal literature with the aspect of post-colonial literature, and it starts with that marginal literature is a huge explosion of colonial strategies in India. schematic introduction serving the issues, themes, and debates from Africa, Asia, South America, and other final writings from America. The term post-colonial undergoes significant semantic expansion to include ethnic studies, the minority studies. The condition of post-coloniality and post-colonialism and basic assumption based on the texts of critical approach has come to know as colonial activity. And if the example we can suppose that the rich on the earth and black skin by Fanon, it argues that the colonialism dehumanized the native. And we know that marginalism is always consists of the race, the culture, the class derivation, and the feminism and the homosexuality, which is so much popularized now. And after that, according to Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak, a subaltern, uh, according to her, as a subaltern cannot speak for her own, the very structure of colonialism prevents speaking. However, Spivak argues that the intellectual project must try to make visible the position of the marginalized. And now it's come to hunger. Hunger was victimized during the imperialism. And if we take an example, that is Mahashwati Devi Mahadu. Mahadu was a boy who was suffering from hunger and got positive. And it was this story also happens in a rural area where the hunger separates the most of the people, and their life comes along with hunger and its consequences. And after Mahadu was treated by a doctor, and he was treated in a food laboratory to feed his physical sickness. And after some days, it was observed that he has started to grow, and the growth was a terminal growth. And the story then starts that Mahadu starts to eat everything, and a big tree. And later we can find that Mahadu ate a whole station. And obviously, the story was fully created by a fictional thinking, and it was a metaphor of imperialistic society. And Marxism. According to Marxism and marginalism may seem to be a thorny subject for debate. We can define the class determination by the theory of Marxism. At first, Marxism is a doctrine-based economic theory. It always consists of idiosyncratic characters, which are designed to evaluate the characters in many other ways. The conjuncture can be defined by two ways. One way is sophisticated and another way is vulgar, on the basis of political and economical mutation. And in the success of the marginalist, we can suppose that in the success of the Dinabandhu Mitra's Nil Darpan dealing with the tyranny of the British indigo planters over the rural Bengali farm laborers. And this period, based on the brutal ruling system, was clearly spurned. The day was essential to Nil Vidroh, better known as Indigo Revolt of February-March 1859 in Bengal, where farmers refused to sow indigo in their fields to protest against exploitative farming under British Raj. In more recent times, and relationship of colonialism with other kinds of sexuality, studies of women in post-colonies have been undertaken in law, literature, and the social sciences. The linkage between gender and racial identities have been subject of numerical autobiographical writings by native Canadian and African women such as Florida Anazoldua and Maria Campbell. Research in social sciences has focused on the status of women in the societies. Anne Bradstreet, the writer in North American Colony, was first to raise her voice against social patriarchy. In her poem Prologue, which is under her third semester syllabus, in her poem Prologue, she wrote against unjustified social rule, which always gives the thought that women cannot compete with a man socially. Female poets were always accused of stealing someone else's poem. The main female protagonist, Matungini, if we take the example from Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay's Rajmohan wife, Here, the main female protagonist, Matangini, has a unique contribution of the tradition. It serves both classical and folk forms. Several of images are taken from literary imagination. The description of Matangini may be typical in certain respects, but her actions are not Matangini, doesn't represent only as Rajmohan's life, but the spirit that personified modern India. This India is surrounded by the capital of India, Calcutta. Matangini, who was always forbidden to fish nearby the river, was being cajoled by Connaught, and however in this way she opened a new world for her. She can never return to the designated first world, but have to choose irrevocably to make the second world as her permanent home. And the class division started in India took place as a result of the creation of new economy in British India. India is well known for its caste conservation. The emergence of classes is the direct result of British rule in India. The production of creation in rural India passes through transformation in the British period, resultant of emergence of the new classes. Due to introduction of private property, right over land, and making a corpse a community, the private property in the form of zamindari and right-to-work system was recognized as a result of new classes. The peasant property came into existence.
I'm sorry, Priyadarshini, I must interrupt and tell you that you have exhausted 6 minutes. You have 2 minutes left to round up.
Okay. Reading gay, the emphasis in this chapter is non-Euro-American post-colonial gay and lesbian writing. Post-colonial queer writing presents a politics with two contradictory themes. Reading gay lesbian writing in post-colonial contexts were based on the assumption that sexuality is important to a text and its critical exegesis, since gay and lesbian writing integral to gay activism and both are located in cultural discourses. In Sham Selhudrai's Funny Boy, it is beautifully shown that how the conflict between homosexuality and ethnicity had started. The main protagonist of the story, Anarchy, is oscillating between his homosexual nature and society. What is more important and that there was evident no standard English is used by post-colonial writers. English has been fragmented by bridalized, dollarized, and indigenized by authors and cultural actors of former colonies. We now have as many Englishes as evidence by studies in journals such as World Englishes and English words have such a fair distinction. Here English is practically recognized to create variants for making worldliness. However, trying to change the current status, I realize these common points merging all together would discourse the critical resources of marginal literature in the aspect of colonialism. Thank you.
Thank you, Priyadarshini. It was a very comprehensive paper and you touched upon a lot of factors that you are presently actively studying. So congratulations, that was well presented. Now I'd like to call upon Rajiv Yadav. He is here, Assistant Professor, Department of English, Indira Gandhi Government PG College, Unnao, Uttar Pradesh. Sir, are you here, Rajiv Yadav?
No, ma'am, he is not there.
Okay. So let us move to the next speaker then, Rajesh Dash. Rajesh Dash, are you here? Okay. Renu Singh.
Yes, ma'am, I'm here.
Okay. Okay. Can you please make yourself visible?
Yes, ma'am. Am I visible, ma'am?
Not yet. Yes, ma'am, you
Yeah,
are.
I think.
So I call upon Renu Singh, Assistant Professor, Department of English, Delhi College of Arts and Commerce, University of Delhi, and she will actually be talking about shades, stigmas, and struggles of Dalits in urban space. Please go ahead, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you for the organizing team for giving me this opportunity that I can share my views. And as ma'am has just read that my title of the paper is Shades, Stigmas and Struggles of the Dalits in Urban Space. So I'll start with few poetic lines. Um, it goes like this. You came bridging that chasm that divides us. Truly, friend, I was really happy. With the naive devotion of Shabari, I arranged the food on your plate. But the moment you looked at the plate, your face changed. With a smirk, you said, "Oh my, do you serve chutney koshambir this way? You still don't know how to serve food. Truly, you folk will never improve." So the line which I have quoted is from Hira Bansode's poem Bosom Friend. The poet explains how she felt humiliated by the remarks of an upper caste friend whom she invited over a lunch at her place. The use of "you folk" in the above quoted lines tells the psyche of the educated upper caste friend. She tries to indicate that poet's low caste identity. The points which I want to raise here are: if this upper caste friend did not believe in caste system and accepted the invite from the lower caste friend, then why did she give such offensive statement? Where does the real problem lies? Was there a conscious intention of the upper caste friend to humiliate her Dalit friend? Or the rhetoric that was used in the conversation was unintentional? Or this lower caste friend took the statement otherwise because of the low esteem, self-esteem developed due to the caste. The question raised may not find a straight answer, but it certainly invokes a rethinking about the urban spaces, which are generally considered of having casteless and secular atmosphere. Such casteless images of the cities have swept the complex practice of caste under the carpet. It is often argued that urban India, being a melting pot of communities and identities, is not the site for caste-based discrimination. The urban arena is expected to dissolve and obliterate caste distinctions and is less oppressive towards Dalit. Um, since the time is very less, so I'm skipping some of the portion from from my paper, ma'am. Um, the possibilities of intermixing of the caste at various spheres, at workplaces, at educational institutions, in travel, in eating places, get increased. Such opportunities in the cities foreground class identities over caste, but these opportunities need not necessarily subdue or end social discrimination. It would not be an exaggeration to say that in the current Indian scenario, caste continues to be a significant force in almost every sector of the society. However, it has been said that the caste practice is weakening in urban social scenario, uh, but in contrast to the point which I have made just right now, if we read the Dalit narratives, they tells us a different story. Uh, the, the contrast in viewpoints between the critiques and the Dalit writers holds considerable importance to understand the intricate functions of the caste in the urban area, and this needs to be discussed further. This paper tries to explore through Ajay Nawariya's short story Tattoo how education, urbanization, and economic development fail to wipe away the caste practice, with the primary intention of observing and understanding the kind of emotional or the psychological trauma the educated Dalits go through to survive in the urban spaces. I'll just quickly talk about the story. Ajay Navaria is teaching. He is a teaching faculty in Jamia Millia Islamia and a very prominent Hindi Dalit writer. And Navaria establishes the new trend in the representation of Dalits through his collection of short stories, Unclaimed Terrain. The story which I have taken, titled Tattoo, is from the collection of from this collection only. In the story Tattoo, Subhash Kumar Paswan, who is the protagonist, and under secretary in the ministry, and belong to the urban middle class. With the changed economic status, constitutional safeguards, and reservation policies, Dalits have an independent position in the society, and so is the protagonist of the story. Navaria has portrayed a different Dalit image, which is divergent from the past images of Dalit presented in Dalit writings. Through his characters, he has tried to show the new Dalit consciousness, the way they are aware of their rights, realizing their importance of education and economic independence. In the story Tattoo, Subhash Kumar decided to join a gym. The the incidents at gyms shows how this man always tries to hide his old shoes, surname, and a tattoo of Namo Buddhai, Jai Bhim in his arm in the gym. The tone of the story is simple and amusing sometimes. It does not portray Dalit facing insult, humiliation, exploitation, or marginalization. The issue that Navaria has taken up in the story is totally different. He talks about the urban Dalits who have risen away from above from the lower status of the or to the higher status, which is like higher castes, and have started hiding their caste identity. The possible reason of it that maybe that they have not come overcome from the past histories, which still make them feel disgraceful in spite of being in authoritative or at equal position. On many occasions, Subhash Kumar knowingly or unknowingly become very offensive when someone tries to know his identity. This may be because of his socio-cultural conditioning Dalits have gone through since their childhood. In such critical condition, life for Dalits in the educated urban society becomes very difficult. They hesitate
Uh,
to have a yeah,
Ma'am,
yes, yeah,
ma'am,
I quickly
I'll just
sum up.
remind you, no problem.
Yeah,
Please do
yeah,
take your time. You have 2 minutes more to wrap up. No
yes,
problem.
ma'am. So basically, he always hesitate to have any sort of relationship beyond the caste boundaries. When he entered the gym, he observed this a very young fellow who just came and said hello to him. He replied, "Hello," and Navaria writes, "I answered him. Between me and the youth on the chair, there was a small rectangular table. His fair skin face glowed the sheen of wealth and long sharp nose as mark of his lineage. He was wearing blue branded shirt and white gleaming Reebok shoes. Under the table, my shoes faced his so under the table, my shoes faced his. They had lost its original color some time ago. I drew back my feet and put some distance between us. So we can see that how he is trying to observe this person and trying to hide his old shoes. And I'm again skipping some of the lines. Uh, yeah. Yes. Dalit's mind is always impregnant with self doubt and shameful feelings of inferiority. The protagonist got worried when the gym instructor questioned, "Are you in government service?" He was worried about his appearance, but soon he was relieved when he was reassured by the gym instructor's explanation. He said to himself, he did not find anything out of place in my attire or in my manner. He was just asking for the business purposes. So we can see that the deep-seated sense of inequality among the Dalits, which has been ingrained for ages and does not allow them to take such comments easily. In the urban spaces, such distinct caste boundaries and restrictions are absent, which invites the Dalits to forge social relations beyond their own caste groups. So they try to avoid mingling with the other caste groups, and they try to have friends which are there in their caste groups. So at the end, when his identity got revealed to the gym instructor because of the phone call, Subhash received and said, "Jai Bhim." The relationship between the gym instructor started. Gym instructor also revealed the truth to him that he also belongs to the Dalit community, and he showed his Buddha locket hidden under the t-shirt. At this point of the time, narrator found himself and the gym instructor were at the same platform. The gleaming white shoes of the instructor were no longer same. This one has changed his shoes, I thought, as I looked at my own dyed ones. Suddenly, my eyes fell upon the tattoo on my wrist. Namo Buddhai, Jai Bhim. Uff, these old and discolored shoes can always be changed, but this tattoo. At the end of the story, the protagonist accepts the reality of his belonging to a Dalit community and understands that it is unalterable. Ajay Navaria has raised a very important question here. Tattoo has become the metaphor for the caste identity. Self-esteem can be altered or polished like the old tattered shoes, but the caste identity in Indian scenario is permanent like a tattoo. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. I must say that was a very insightful and engaging presentation. And
Thank you.
we don't really talk about the problem that Dalits do face in the urban space, and economic upliftment not essentially leads to destigmatization of the entire process. That was indeed a very engaging paper. So
Thank you
thank you,
so much.
ma'am. I think Rajesh Dash is with us.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so we'll
Yes,
call
ma'am. I'm here.
upon, yes, Rajesh Dash, MPhil scholar, Vishwabharati University, Shantiniketan, West Bengal, India, and he will be reading his paper on Choti Munda and his arrow, a saga of microscopic marginality. So please, Rajesh Dash, carry on with your presentation.
Thank you, ma'am. At first, I give my thanks to the Rishi Chandra College for taking such an laudable attempt to give us scope to present our papers. And marginality is such a kind of relevant topic today. Okay, I should start my paper. The name of my paper is Choti Munda and his arrow, the saga of microscopic marginality. Actually, marginality is a very prominent issue today. And nowadays, the term marginality has been very much dynamic. It has relation to many things of our society. So what do you mean by the general term margin? It means that which is situated at the edge of something. And as it is situated at the edge of something, so it does not get importance. This is where the very idea of margin, from margin we can form the word marginality, from margin we can also form the word marginalization. So marginalization refers to the very process of being excluded from the mainstream of society. So in this way, marginality alludes to a condition where various types of lacks are there. Sometimes the lacks are there, or sometimes it has been created by the hegemonic society, and in this way. So there are various types of marginality. Sometimes the people are marginalized from society. They do not get proper importance in their society. So this is called social marginalization. Sometimes this may happen with culture. So this may be the cultural marginalization. Sometimes it also may be about education. So that should be the educational marginalization. So it also may be about economics. And whenever the question of economics comes to the fore, it becomes very much important. Societal marginality alludes to social conditions in terms of lacking opportunities, resources, and skills compared to mainstream society. These social inequalities can be related to restricted participation in public decision making as well as self-esteem. So the discrimination of marginalized people frequently arises from markers like race, gender, sexuality, ethnicities, culture, social class, or age. In this way, societal marginality comes to the fore. Now, spatial marginality describes geographical disadvantage, which include a geographically obstructed accessibility to be economic centers, lacking infrastructure, or an exclusion from technological advancement. In social and human geography, spatial marginality can be of various types. As for example, there is a macrospatial marginality, there is microspatial marginality, and there is situ spatial marginality. Macrospatial marginality occurs between central locations and areas distant from economic activity. As for example, we can take the example of metropolis and countryside divide. And microspatial marginality is between geographically closer locations and areas, that is urban township within metropolitan areas. And C2 spatial marginality, it occurs within very small territories and the areas of urban gentrifications, where the wealthier people go or move into the less prosperous neighborhoods. So these are the various types of, or these are the various forms of marginality which the theoretician have spoke of. In these perspectives, I should mention the name of Thomas Stodulka, who has written the famous book Coming of Age on the Streets of Java, Coping with Marginality, Stigma and Illness. In this book, he has clarified all the ideas. Even another book which is also important, that is Marginality and Modernity by Mauro Giardillo. In this book, he has also talked about the central and periphery polarity in the discussion of marginality. So in my first portion of my presenting the paper, I have discussed the basic ideas about marginality. Now I should shift to the very novel, The Choti Munda and His Arrow, written by Mahashweta Devi. The very purpose of my article is to explore the marginalized condition of the people which we find in the description or in the narrative of the novel. Mahashweta Devi have written many such novels which deals with the life of the Indian Adivasis. And in this novel, Choti Munda and His Arrow, which was published in 1980 in Bengali, later it was translated into English. And the famous theoretician and critic Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak has translated the book into English in 2002. So, as we are Bengali people, so I think we should read the Bengali text also, and the translation of English, which has been translated by Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak. So now we can discuss in very brief what actually happened in the novel, or what is the narrative in Choti Munda and His Arrow.
Mr. Das, I'm very sorry to interrupt, but may you please just quicken up the presentation, because we have only 1.5 minutes left.
Oh. Okay, ma'am. Okay.
I'm really very sorry, because we are much constrained over time. So very sorry for that.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am. I understand. Okay, so in the novel, so I should just skip the storyline. Then I just come directly where the marginalization is detected. In the novel, we see that the life of Choti Munda. Choti is a man of Munda community, and there are the other Adivasi communities like Chhagan, Kurmi, Dhobi. So there are the Adivasi communities and also the lower caste Hindu untouchables. And these people who live in the Choti village by the river Choti, surrounded by dense forest, they lived in their own way. They have their own culture, they have their own social system, administrative system, but the mainstream society goes there, and there are many upper caste people like Tiratnath Lala, Japu Singh, there is Paluhan, there is Romeo, and there are other upper class people who went there and they started to exercise bonded labor. Before Indian independence, there was the very practice of bonded labor, and by the pressure of this bonded labor, the people cannot come out. So from generation to generation, they became in the wheel of bonded labor. So they are exploited in this way, and in this way they are marginalized. They are marginalized into taking their education, into taking the health benefits. They are marginalized politically. After independence, the novel also presents the very scenario where we find the new political parties. They have also started their own ideology to inculcate into their minds, so that they can also use their vote and they can also exploit them in various types of way. So Mahasweta Devi had revealed that from 1900 to the post-emergency time of Indian history, there are the Adivasi people who are almost at the background, but they have been exploited. They have been marginalized from various points of view. It is from cultural points of view, it is from social point of view, it is from political, geographical, educational, health benefit, and ultimately the new economic patterns of India. In this way, they have been prey of marginalization. So my paper presents all these things. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Das. It was initially it was a very comprehensive introduction on the very concept of marginalization, and we would have really loved to hear more regarding the particular novel by Mahasweta Devi that you were talking about. She being that very powerful voice of the marginalized tribal community, as we know her to be. So thank you once again. So we'll is Rajiv Yadav here?
Thank you.
Sir, Rajiv Yadav, are you here?
No, ma'am, he's not there.
Okay, so Pousali Sarkar, is Pousali around?
No, he's also.
Okay.
She's also.
So we'll just move forward. Rima Bera, are you here?
No, ma'am.
That actually brings us to you, Rinkita. So will you be presenting now?
Yes, ma'am. Am I visible, ma'am?
Let me find out. Yes, you are. So we welcome Rinkita Saha, student of MA in English, Literature and Language Studies, Rishi Bankim Chandra College, Naihati, and she'll be talking about social realism in Premchand's The Shroud. Rinkita, please go ahead.
Thank you, ma'am. Before starting my paper, I would like to thank all the organizing committee for arranging such intriguing webinar, even in this dire situation. So the title of my paper is Social Realism in Premchand's The Shroud. I'm going to make a parallel analysis of The Shroud and Sadgati. The term Dalit means crushed or ground, and it describes the living conditions for centuries of a large group of people in India. Nowadays, the term refers to any member of large group of socially oppressed people in India. The emphasis is laid on the group's social exclusion as they were proclaimed untouchables by the lawgivers of the traditional Varna system. Quite naturally, they have been made to the menial and dirty jobs, often very hard and toilsome. Thus, for centuries, these people have been economically exploited, socially discriminated, and culturally marginalized. In recent years, the meaning of the term has been extended to include all those who are oppressed and marginalized. Once in a presidential address at the first All India Progressive Writers Conference Munshi Premchand delivered, I quote, "Literature can be best defined as a criticism of life. The literature of our immediate past had nothing to do with actuality. Our writers were living in a world of dreams and were writing things like Fesanai Ajaib or Chandrakanta tales told by only for entertainment or to satisfy our sense of wonder. In this literature, the dominant notes were either sex or mysticism, pessimism or fatalism. It was devoid of vigor, originality, and even the power of observation. The literature which does not arouse in us a critical spirit or satisfy our spiritual and intellectual needs, which is not force-giving and dynamic, which does not awaken our sense of beauty, which does not make us face the grim realities of life in a spirit of determination, has no use for us today. It cannot even be termed as literature." Unquote. Premchand becomes the standard bearer of humanity, of moral brightness, of nobility. It becomes his duty to help the downtrodden, oppressed, and exploited people. Fiction is supposed to reflect life. As new events happen before his eyes in the years from 1907 to 1936, his stories show a full fictional use of passing scene in India. The term social realism is a term that derives from Russian-inspired belief about the function of literature in a revolutionary socialist society. Social realism is inspired in various ways by Russian Revolution, Soviet communism, international Marxism, and the need to respond critically and in a denunciatory fashion to the various mechanisms of repression and the frustration of personal and collective aspiration. Kafan or the Shroud is about two low-caste father and his son, Hisu and Madhav, who are very poor laborers in a village. An emergency occurs when the son's wife dies while giving birth to a child and the family has no money to cremate the body of the dead woman. The lazy duos ask for money from the village zamindar and the other members of the society. However, they use the money to get liquor and food instead of giving shroud to the dead woman. Premchand has been one of the most foremost writers who incorporate the social issues in his writings. In his writing, one can easily find the dealing of Dalit psyche and the politics revolving around the concept of purity through the Dalit characters. Premchand is eminent while hypothesizing the story of the upper class hegemony upon the untouchables. It can be pointed out from the shroud that Ghisu and Mother would not be such inhuman if they had enough money to perform the last rites of Buddhya. The ritual of mourning is a symbol of lavishness, which men like those that of the protagonist cannot afford. Even when they went to the tavern to drink, they kept thanking Buddhya for serving food after her death. I quote, even in the death, she is feeding us, unquote. The hegemonic society compelled them to be insensitive. Both the characters have been penned down or premises of the Varna system, which is ruled by the tyranny of the upper class people. In the short story, Buddhya has been the silent speaker who speaks for the thrice subjugated women folk who are constantly being trodden under the institution of caste, class, and gender. Thus, it is clear that Premchand has deliberately portrayed Buddhya as a silent one to bring light on the plight of the social subjugation upon a Dalit woman based on her caste, class, and gender. The orthodox Brahmanism taught everyone that after bereavement, one would go to heaven even though he or she spent a hellish life without food or money in this mortal world. Therefore, after drinking to their heart's content, both the father and the son were sure that Buddhya would attain the test of heaven for her good deeds while living. Sadgati or deliverance is a vicious indictment of the Indian caste system. When a poor and low-class village shoe mender Dukhiya, who lives with his wife Juriya, goes to the village Brahmin to get the date of his daughter's marriage fixed, the Brahmin in turn asks for labor without paying exchange. The Pandit makes him sweep his house, cut logs of tree. Dukhi does all this work without eating food from the morning. And at the end, Dukhi dies while working but does not get the proper funeral as he belongs to the lower caste. The Pandit somehow drags him to the field where the predators eat him. In the story, Premchand has meticulously penned down the hegemonic power structure of the society. Dukhi, the innocent tanner, comes to the Pandit for asking the date of his daughter's marriage and compensates the price of Brahmin by dying at the end. The upper class of Brahmin intentionally engages Dukhi in several household works like feeding the cow, sweeping, plastering the sitting room with cow dung, chopping wood, carrying and storing 4 stacks of straw in the hay store. Moreover, being a poverty-stricken person, Dukhi suppresses his hunger and does all the assigned works silently just to have the godly sight in his house. Unfortunately, the Dalits have been a subject of continuous suppression. That is why in every field, the upper class Brahmin as well as the society, for their own sake, exploited them. The ultimate irony of the title lies in the last line of the story where Premchand rhymes, I quote, "This was the reward of a whole life of the devotion, service and faith," unquote. The hegemonic society makes us believe that when it is a matter of the Dalit person, then he or she cannot think of having Sadgati or deliverance after their demise. This story speaks of the...
Rinkita?
Yes, ma'am?
Yes, you have 2 more minutes, please.
Okay, ma'am. Okay. So this story speaks of the pathetic lives of the Chamar community. Dukhi's body lies in the portion like no man's land where he remains unclaimed forever. At the orthodoxical Brahmanism, being a messenger of God teaches us about going to heaven, but in case of a Dalit, he or she does not have the right even to think of having a proper funeral after their demise. The Dalit bodies have become the subject of extreme abundance in the scene where the Pandit sprinkles the holy water throughout his house in order to spread purity after the death of Dukhi. Premchand beautifully portrays the fabricated hypocrisy behind the so-called pious Brahmin that when he does not have the humanity to admit the tanner's body, no sacred water can purify his soul as well as the house. In both the stories, Premchand has pointed out that caste, class, and gender plays a very important role in the typical Indian society. These three typical notions subjugate the Dalits in their financial solidity. The tragic lives of both the stories have been portrayed based on the rural Indian society and its merciless form of exploration. Both the stories are enormously realistic as well as ask questions to the corrupted socio-cultural economic system. Thus, both the stories contribute massively in the exploitation of the marginalized voices. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Rinkita. I'm sure that no discussion on the concept of marginalization is possible, especially in the Indian context, without bringing in Premchand. And
Yes.
thank you for your very very detailed study on two of his major short stories. So we'll move over to the next speaker now. Just as a reminder, we are not really welcoming questions. We are not really letting speakers actually ask questions. They can very well type their questions out if they have any queries, if they have any other points they want to raise. But at this moment, we're not really taking in questions. That is reserved for the end of the session. I'll just call upon our next speakers. It's a joint paper by Shagor Dash and Oishani Pandey. Are they here?
Yes, ma'am. Am I visible?
Yes, Oishani, you are very visible. So it is, they are students of the UG Department of English, Presidency University, Kolkata, and they'll be presenting a paper on writing from the margins, interrogating cultural decay in a river called Titash. So Oishani, please go ahead.
Yes. So good evening all. As ma'am have already said that we are going to present a paper titled Writing from the Margins, Interrogating Cultural Decay in a River Called Titash. As it's a joint presentation, I'm going to present the first part and Shagor would continue with the letter. Advaita Mallabanwan's Titash Ekti Nodin Nam depicts the fisherman community of the Malos who lived by the bank of river Titash in East Bengal, now Bangladesh. It is one of the famous river-centric novels written in Bengali, which rather than just using the backset of a river, gives an insider's insight of the Malo community. Earlier interpretation of Titash have focused on its descriptiveness and the detailing of the marginalized people's culture. However, Bangla Dalit Sahitya Samstha has claimed that Titash is one of the first Bengali novel that deals with the deals with the lives of the lower caste people. In order to incorporate aspects pertaining to both of these readings, this paper would discuss the elements of crisis that led to the fragmentation of the Malo community. In the novel, the community faces two destructive forces. One is environmental, that is the drying up of the river, and this leads to an occupational crisis of the members of the community who were mostly fishermen. But it was the death of the cultural memory of the Malos which had a far deeper effect on them and gradually led to the displacement of the community. A large portion of the novel is about the rituals and songs of the community. The popular culture of the folk in the Malo songs belong to a genre known as Deha Tattva and Deha Tattva songs, which include a wide range of rural folk songs with philosophical messages from the non-orthodox sects. Moreover, the performance of these songs were collective in nature and resisted any formation of absolute hierarchy between the audience and the performer. Titash can be interpreted as a story of Bashanti's resistance to the invasion of Jatra group. Jatra, or traveling folk theatre companies, with its high-pitched and stylized acting, its grand demeanor, its broad conflicts, and its crude and coarse comedy, gained tremendous popularity in 19th and 20th century villages. Not only the fact that the Jatra operas and songs were belonged to book, but also the use of harmonium, tabla, and violin for accompaniment instead of folk-style string instruments and khol reflects the sophistication of the rural elite. Apart from the aesthetic differences, these cultural forms can be interpreted by considering the politics of hierarchization. In the Jatra group, the director cum manager was called Odhikari, owner, who controlled every aspect of the theatre. The politics of marginalization was not only showcased in the division between the director manager and the actors in the group, but also by the boundaries between the active performers on the stage and the passive audience. Unlike the Malos' own cultural practices, in which everybody was the performer of his or her own bhakti, the Jatra changed them into passive and alienated spectator. Now, I would like to hand over the rest of the paper to Shagur. Over to you, Shagur.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Ishani. Now, I will be presenting the rest of the paper. Dishyadoti Vargi, in her interventionist reading of the text, has located the politics of Onchol or region in Tita Shakti Nodinam and other contemporary river-centering novels. According to her, Ancholic Sahitya or literature of the region tends to follow an ideology of the discovery of the new and different. The ideology of the Onchol resembles the anthropological subject-object dichotomy which marginalizes the other as a subordinate being. Moreover, the politics of Jatra, which transforms the Malos into the naive and passive observer audience, is in line with the same form of objectification that determined the authoritative West as the adult West and the object of the study as the native children. This in turn upholds the binary of cultured and uncultured that justifies the inferiority of Dalit as opposed to the cultured and refined upper caste. It is the modernist overconfidence of the anthropological subject by which the anthropologist feels free to invade any field of knowledge and objectify the other as a coherent body of objective knowledge. This type of confidence also can be pointed out in the ease with which the Jatra people in Titash occupy the houses of the Malos and converts them into passive spectators. The claim to consider the autobiographical text as ethnographic site is to eradicate the anthropological tendency to objectify the other. M.N. Srinivas calls for a shift from the study of the self in other to that of the self itself. Sundar Sarkar later extends this claim, suggesting that fiction based on lived experience could actually be seen as a legitimate mode of theorizing the other. The philosophical other is linked to the anthropological one, and this linkage showcases the unattainability of the other. Sarkar writes, the other is not an object which can be completely accessed through rational epistemologies. Thus, its presence derives through its perpetual absence, and fiction is effective in identifying the traces of the other. Unlike the anthropological practices that try to subsume the native culture, the native children, into the intelligibility of the canonical subject of the adult and negates its identity, the author of a river called Tita Shakti Nodinam does not contrast and alienate the Malo culture. Lada Adatta Mollavarwan documents the culture of the community not as a product but as a practice. In the novel, the cultural consciousness is depicted in the interactions of the characters and not as systematic exchanges between fixed units, as Raymond Williams would say. Mollavarman tries to ignore the cultural compartmentalization that ideology of Anchalik Sahitya promoted, that the community is shown, thus the community is shown as an active organism with its intricacies and digressions. Berge also points out the elegiac mood of the novel. The author does not try to collect or recreate the culture, the Malo culture, because to do that,
Shagur,
yeah, ma'am, just
I need to come in and just remind you that you have around 1.5 minutes left.
All right, ma'am.
Okay.
The author does not try to collect or recreate the Malo culture, because to do that is to recreate it outside its natural habitat. Thus, the novel becomes a testament of Dalit subjectivity and attempts to recognize the other in the economic and social dynamics of intercultural relationships. Thank you for your patience, ma'am.
Thank you both Oishani and Shagur, if I am saying the names right. Like it is very heartening to see young researchers like you to take texts and delve into them so deeply. So it has been a very insightful paper on this entire process of subjectivity and how otherization works. So thank you so much. We look forward to reading the paper. when it eventually gets published. So with that,
Thank you, ma'am.
I'll just hand over this session to Professor Banerjee, who will be chairing for the next 8 papers. And after that, there has been 3 participants who have been missing in this session. At the end of it, we may once again see that if we can accommodate them. Just for, just in order to remind you, Rima Bera, Rajiv Yadav and Pousali Sarkar, you haven't presented yet. So if you are around, you can just unmute your mic and tell us that you are here. Okay, so I presume that none of them are here. So I just call upon Professor Debdeep Banerjee to chair the session for the next 8 presenters. Over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Roy. This session has been really wonderful, and I was really thinking that I was very impressed with these young research scholars. And so now I would like to request Professor Srijanee Banerjee, Assistant Professor in the English Department, Sundarban Haji SRK College, Osaba, West Bengal.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, sir, you're absolutely audible and visible.
Okay. Thank you so much, Professor Banerjee. I think I'll start by presenting my screen now. Just if I may. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. I begin, my paper is titled Returning to Her Stones, Reassessing Calcutta's Spaces of Marginality in Mrinal Sen's Interview. Yeah. I begin with a quote by Walter Benjamin, who says, "Our taverns and our metropolitan streets, our offices and furnished rooms, our railroad stations and our factories appear to have us locked up hopelessly. Then came the film and burst this prison world asunder by the dynamite of the 10th of a second, so that now in the midst of its far-flung ruins and debris, we calmly and adventurously go traveling." The city, being part of the lived experience, becomes rejudged and reassessed in the hands of the moving image. The camera, as Benjamin says, introduces us to visual impulses, which transforms the unconsciously penetrated space to one that is consciously explored by man. Cinema has explored space and its compartmentalization consciously, seeing it anew and offering us a reassessment of the same through its centrality and marginality. Under the context, this paper seeks to analyze Mrinal Sen's Interview, the first film of his widely acclaimed Calcutta trilogy, and argue that though inherently a study of an urban individual fixated in its own historicity, the film is essentially a study of the marginalization of Calcutta space during the 1970s and negotiation of that space through the attempt of social exclusion, which inherently becomes an important marker of social identity. Calcutta, the proverbial city of modernity, becomes in Sen's hands not just the narrative backdrop, but the entire discursive terrain of human action and experience that we see in the film. Now, focusing on ideas of space that were prevalent and that are prevalent, which has been there in social geography for some time, the first we come to Henri Lefebvre's The Production of Space, David Sibley, who talks about the marginalization of space and how the relegation of weaker groups in society to less desirable environments occurs in the city. Social exclusion eventually leads to a formation of social identity, and how cities are structured where the marginalized groups are placed outside the mainstream spaces of common modern capitalist economy. Mrinal Sen's Interview offers a succinct study of the same in a proverbially partitioned city. And I use the word partitioned with a pinch of salt because historically as well as economically, the city has remained a bordered and partitioned space. The story of Interview, the plot line is absolutely very thin, which focuses on an almost surreal search of suit by the protagonist Ranjit, who requires it to attend a job interview in an English firm. The search of the suit becomes a metaphor for the independent neo-colonial Calcutta, where, according to Sen, colonial legacy is ever present, not just on the level of attire, but operating on an encompassing reality. Now, we The first sequence of the film looks at Calcutta as a bordered city. We see in a sweeping sequence, the film begins with the images of Victoria Memorial, an emblem of colonial enterprise, and focuses on the post-independence slum, lower middle class neighborhood, and comprising the two facets of the Calcutta space. The marginality of the Bhadralok class, which the identity who were occupying peripheral spaces in the city at the time, both geographically and economically, comes to the fore. Ranjit, we know, is a proverbial Bhadralok, and he occupies spaces where with manual laborers, milkmen, women who earn by supplying them in shanty the places, and the sequence of the fish market also comes to the fore as spaces which are marginalized from the modern capital economy. The streets in Minalson's interview comes out as important spaces of marginality, where we see the poverty in the city. Ranjit walks most of the film, and he uses public transports, and shots were taken on the city of the character mostly. We also see the city as being the site of revolution and change, and here we see snippets or footages from the Naxal revolution that was going on at the time. Now, marginality, giving voice to marginality also occurs not just with what we see and the space that we see on geographically, but also the space that the film inhabits. Mainstream cinema at that point of time was not using techniques that Sen used in the film. For example, the verite technique, where the breaking of the proverbial fourth wall occurred. And we can see K.K. Mahajan, the cinematographer, actually pointing the camera right at the audience. And we have characters, time again, speaking directly to the audience. And it was something which was sort of marginal at that point of time, but revolutionary nonetheless in the cinematic technique, which gave voice, which is very essential, I think, to give voice to the marginal spaces of the city that Sen was exploring. Now, Ranjit's sartorial conundrum, the expression of metaphorical passport to cross over from his space of marginality, that is his room, we can see here. This is where Ranjit is, and this is where actually he wants to be. Now, the sartorial metaphor is his passport to transfer from this space, from his home to the space where he wants to belong, which is a proverbial jate otha, or rising class in Bengali. And we notice how the caste register, the linguistic register of caste, comes to the fore again. Ranjit wishes to cross the boundary.
Banerjee, you have 2 minutes left.
Okay, thank you. And how borders are landscapes of exclusion by the very existence and separates groups, and it's the separation which Ranjit wants to cross. Here we see how the suit becomes his dream, which he wants to inhabit, the world he wants to inhabit, but ultimately it's bifurcated and he remains a marginal without being part of that space. Now, as I comes to the conclusion, Ranjit is clearly outside the techno-capitalist space which Mrinal Sen brings to the fore in the interview scene, and which is ironical. We see in the film the placard, "In this country, computer is a job eater," at a time where we are dependent on the computers evermore. In conclusion, I'd like to add, Mrinal Sen has always been a strong admirer of Elio Vittorini's famous words: "The point is not to pocket the truth, but to chase it." Hence, as the investigation into the politics of marginal spaces in Calcutta consummates with a call for revolution in interview, there will be a need to locate the struggle through history and eventually the arrival of Sumit, the Podatik, who will introspect. Interview marks the start of the political films of the decade and later introspective analysis, where he would become almost a chronicler of Calcutta, moving like a flaneur, observing the city, both being within and without. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Banerjee. That has been a really enriching session, and thank you for choosing such an unconventional topic. Your presentation reminded me of Martin Scorsese's famous words: "Cinema is a matter of what's in the frame and what's out." Thank you so much for this lovely presentation. So now,
Thank you so much.
Now I would like to invite Professor Saira Siddiqui, Assistant Professor of Sarojini Naidu Vanita Mahavidyalaya, Nampalli Exhibition Grounds, Hyderabad. And her topic is on the way to Dargah, on the way to Dargah, life of the marginalized. Professor Siddiqui, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Shall I start, sir? Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible and visible as well. You can start your presentation.
Okay, sir. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My topic is On the Way to Dargah, a life of marginalized. The word Dalit is derived from the Sanskrit word meaning crushed. Thus, Dalit are the people who are broken in such way that they are unable to rise and better themselves. The writers of Manusmriti belong to the ruling class and hence dictated terms which would maintain the status quo. The division of society into varnas was initially on the basis of karma or vocation. Dalit history was original in and oral in nature, which describes the social groups who are geographically outside of the hegemonic power structure. For thousands of years, they deprived of power, property, and position. Dalit could break their shackles of slavery following the thoughts of Baba Saheb Ambedkar. Dalit literature has arisen from the cultural conflict. Since the downtrodden, Dalits have no place in the canonical literature of India. It can be classified into three phases. First is proto-Dalit activism. Second, the emergence of consolidation of Ambedkarite paradigms. And third, the birth of the Dalit movement, which begins with the birth of Dalit Panther movement in Maharashtra in 1972. Namdev Dasal also belonged to this phase. He is a noted Marathi poet and one of the leaders of the Dalit Panther movement, born into a Dalit family of Pargaon village in Pune. Later moved on to Bombay. His poetry is filled with the notions of heterotopia, firstly used by the philosopher Michael Foucault in his essay of Other Space, Utopia and Heterotopia. This concept has a great influence in urban theory since it entered into the late 1960s. The present poem, On the Way to Dargah, presents in the context of the heterotopias as they depict the counter space such as footpath against the mainstream spaces of Bombay city. The poem is an extract from Dasal's poetry collection entitled Gol Pita, 1971, translated into English by Dilip Chatterjee, pertaining to the rejection of the age-old darkness in the life of Dalits. I quote, "A leaking sun went burning out into the night's embrace," unquote. Thus pathetically presents the exploitation and marginalization of his forefathers from ages where stomachs are empty. And to fill them up, women sell themselves off during night, and next day their bodies left over after being consumed by shame and sensibility. Quote, "When I was born on a pavement in crumpled rags and became orphan," unquote. Dussel says he was born and grew in such environment where prostitutes and their children grew up and spent their entire life on the road. He came to Bombay along with his father to earn a living for the family, and he started working as a potter in a Muslim meat shop in Bombay, located near Gol Pita, meaning Gol means round and Pita is a country liquor shop. That's why he kept his first literary masterpiece after the name of ghetto scheduled caste people. Thus grew up among smugglers, drug peddlers. He further says, quote, "She went to Our Father in heaven. She was tired of the harassing ghost in the street, unquote. He says that his mother was living on the earth, that is a hellish life she was leading, and the only way to escape from this structure is death. The concluding lines of the poem are as follows, quote, give 5 paisa, take 5 curses on the way to Dargah, unquote. These lines explain how the marginalized people, they live their lives on the roads, begging in Bombay near Dargah, where as the religion is also failed to convince the minds of devotees to do charity, to lift up the pathetic condition of downtrodden masses of the city, where the Dalits are helpless to lead illegal lives. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Professor Siddiqui. And that has really been an enriching session in a world that is torn apart by violence and clash of civilizations and clash of ideals. These words will definitely seem to be an eye opener. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
So now I would like to request Sanchari Basak, Professor Sanchari Basak, SACT from Banipur Mahila Mahavidyalaya, and her topic is she will be talking about the tragedy of Kashmir, an interpretation of Vishal Bhardwaj's film Haider and Basharat Pierce's memoir Curfewed Night. Ma'am, are you there?
Yes. Thank you so much, organizers, for giving me the opportunity. Without wasting much time, I'm starting my paper. The Tragedy of Kashmir, an interpretation of Vishal Bhardwaj's film Haider and Basharat Pierce's memoir Curfewed Night. In Indian popular culture, Kashmir used to be seen as a paradise on earth. Its idyllic beauty and lyrical scenery have inspired poets and artists, and the traditional association of its picturesque landscape with romantic love has frequently been exploited by Mumbai's film industry. Kashmiri's composite culture, which blended Hindu and Islamic traditions, used to be referred as Kashmiriyat. It weaved the strong fabric of Hindu-Muslim bonding, communal harmony, and socio-religious coexistence. This Hindu-Muslim balance, however, was broken in course of time by greed for power, so that Kashmir has become a perpetual battleground even in religious terms, the place of political contention between India and Pakistan, both claiming the legal ownership of the region. Hence, the whole area has been militarized and subjected to political repression to the point of drowning in an arbitrary state of violence. Vishal Bhardwaj's screen adaptation Haider reproduces Shakespeare's Hamlet by transposing its setting from late medieval rotten Denmark to the embattled Kashmir of 1995, a region over which both India and Pakistan have fought since partition in 1947. The choice of setting Haider in 1995 Kashmir is explained by the director in the preface of the original screenplay. After having found his wife Rekha crying in the middle of the night while reading Basharat Pierce's memoir, Curfewed Night, Bharadwaj decided to read the reporter's memoir himself. After reading the book, he was so moved that he opted for a story in the tormented region of Kashmir, firmly believing that Kashmir has been the biggest tragedy of modern Indian history and that no film has been made to really capture it. The collaboration with Peer ensued spontaneously. Haider thus departs from being a mere spy thriller and instead underpins a tragedy of the whole community, focusing especially on the idea of loss of identity. The filmmaker aimed to comment on an anti-human situation that could not be kept hidden any further. Militantism rose in Kashmir in 1989 when Hindu Kashmiris were expelled from their native land. The plausible reasons suggested for the emergence of insurgency include a lack of adequate opportunities for Kashmiri youths, some political decisions taken by the central government of India, and the meddling of Pakistan in the region's affairs. As a consequence, the presence of the Indian armed forces increased in the valley, and the Indian government instituted the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, AFSPA, which initially introduced to tackle terrorism, ended up giving the Indian Army the power to shoot anyone suspected of being a threat, granting officers immunity from prosecution in a court of law. according to the special powers conferred to the Indian soldiers by AFSPA, they are free to interrogate and arrest any people suspected of being linked to any militant organizations, as well as to destroy their houses. In one chilling scene of Hyder, a man, his face covered in a balaclava, plays judge and jury from a jeep as civilians are paraded in front of him. With just a movement of his eyes, he decides their fate, dismissed or detained. The disproportionate number of security personnel and the disproportionate amount of power and impunity they wield under the AFSPA and other laws means that the everyday life of ordinary Kashmiris is turned into living hell. There is a bunker every few hundred meters and a camp for every few villages. There are so many security checks and so many orders to produce ID proofs that the whole of Kashmir is transformed into a jail for the natives. There are regular killings, rapes, molestations, beatings, and an unrelenting dose of threat to life, honor, family, and property, resulting in constant fear and humiliation. To an ordinary Kashmiri, even when the security forces are not indulging themselves in their privileges, the nature and the memory of the relationship the people share with the security forces is such that in a common space, the former are reduced to an inferior class, further enraging the natives who see such degradation in their own land as one of the worst possible disgraces. In Hyder, the issue of losing one's personal identity is highlighted effectively in a scene where a Kashmiri man interpreted by Basharat Pir himself stands on the threshold of his own house without entering. Ruhudar intervenes. He asks the man to show his identity card, frisks him as Indian officers usually do, then allows him to cross the doorsill. This man is diagnosed with a pathological condition called new disease, which clearly witnesses the level of juridical intervention in people's lives. This particular episode alludes to Kashmiri author Akhtar Mohiuddin's short story New Disease. In Peer's memoir, allusion to such psychological state is also found. One of the most touching and shocking scenes of the film occurs in the song Jhilam during Hyder's search for his father. A blood-soaked boy leaps out of a truck full of stinking, mutilated corpses and dances in jubilation, rejoicing to be alive. The underneath of the rubric of the apparent reasons of militarization with impunity are buried deeper reasons akin to a political subconscious. What Kashmiris assert through their protests is the political right of self-determination and not just the facts of human rights abuses. They do not merely want the removal of military... Yes? Yeah, just a minute. Okay. At the clock tower of Lal Chowk, the allegedly gone insane protagonist performs its political resistance and condemns both India and Pakistan, whose laws were distorted in such a way that they now seem to defend the oppressors rather than the oppressed. Such an episode represents a turning point in both film and character's mission, as Hyder adds to personal revenge, also the aim to oppose the larger corrupt system dictated by the Indian government and by those local politicians that are often in connivance with the Indian forces, as testified by his uncle Khurram. The young man's sufferings are indicative of the whole region's painful reality here embodied by the crowd. On another occasion, mothers and wives holding photographs of their beloved sons and husbands are filmed in silent vigil in front of the army barracks, waiting patiently for an answer about their men's destiny. Kashmiris have become the citizens of a no man's land. Not only are they searching for their disappeared relatives, they are also looking for their own selves, for their identity, and for a permanent peace in their land. In this regard, Deshmukh defines Kashmir as a burning paradise, carrying the relics of broken relations where people forlorn in their motherland and just live of their fragmented memories. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. This topic has been a very controversial one since Hyder got released, and according to the BBC polls, Hyder got hashtag 75,000 hashtag boycott Hyder tweets in one day, and as it is considered to be one of the most controversial films of the Indian film history. So up next, I would like to call Sanchita Goswami. Sanchita Goswami, student of MA 4th semester, RBC College, Naihati, and she will be talking on notion of witchcraft, how society frames a human into a witch, with reference to the movie Bulbul. Sanchita, you have chosen a very unconventional topic, and please,
Yes.
Sanchita, where
Yes.
you?
Am I audible?
Sanchita, please start your presentation.
Okay.
Yes, you're audible.
Okay. Good evening to the respected teachers, dear coordinators, and dear fellow participants. I'd like to present my paper on notion of witchcraft, how society frames human into witch, with reference to the movie Bulbul. Sir, can I present my PPT?
Sure.
Okay. Just a second. Just a second. Okay. Is it visible? Is my PPT visible?
Yes, it's visible.
Okay. So, my topic is notion of witchcraft, how society frames a human into witch, with reference to the movie Bulbul. Since childhood, people all over the world have grown up with the notions of angels, demons, monsters, aliens, witches, gods, and goddesses through various children's books, folklores, or simply by listening to stories from their parents and grandparents. These stories contain characters of angel-like princes and princesses, along with devil stepmothers, witches, monsters, and so on. While listening to or reading sufferings of those princes and princesses, children always expect a poetic justice that will normalize all the circumstances and bring a happy ending. But after reaching to a certain age, they realize that these stories are nothing except false notions or illusions. There are no such things like angels or demons. These concepts again revive when the stories of these characters are told to their next generation. But the question that arises in their mind is, from where did these notions come? Nowadays, people are well aware about the facts of witches and witchcraft through popular storybooks and movies, but they do not know the origin. This paper will try to focus on these particular issues. It will also find out the position of witches in the eyes of the society with reference to the movie Bulbul, directed by Anvita Dutt Gupta. Now I move towards the plot. Bulbul is the story of a young Bengali zamindar wife who was tortured both mentally and physically by her husband and in-laws. She became a witch afterwards and punished those people who were the torturers. The storyline contains a strong feminist approach along with the myth and history. Now, I'm moving towards history. To understand the myth, one should go through the history. Behind every myth, there is a particular history. Witches and witchcraft have also a very long history. History points out that the notion of witches first came from the Bible. An article, History of Witches, has studied minutely about the witches and says witches were perceived as evil beings by early Christians in Europe, inspiring the iconic Halloween figure. It continues. Early witches were people who practiced witchcraft using magic spells and calling upon spirits for help or to bring about change. Most witches were thought to be pagans doing the devil's work. Many, however, were simply natural healers or so-called wise women whose choice of profession was misunderstood. In another article, Jeffrey Burton Russell has given a brief definition on witchcraft. To him, witchcraft, traditionally the exercise or invocation of alleged supernatural powers to control people on events, practices, typically involving sorcery or magic. There is also a history in the story of Bulbul. The background in this movie is based on the time period of 1881's Bengal. It shows how the life of a particular person becomes a history when it comes to misbeliefs and self-made notions. The movie is somewhere historical as it depicts the painful journey of Bulbul's life. In this movie, protagonist Bulbul neither worshipped the devil nor she said a single word against her in-laws. Still, she suffered because of misunderstanding and doubt. She had transformed herself into a witch after getting extreme pain. Unlike the stereotypical history of the witches, Bulbul possesses a different history that is underlying in this movie. And here comes myth. Apart from the history, one should do focus on myth. There is various myths on witches and witchcraft. In this paper, the myth of Medusa will be discussed. Everyone knows that Medusa from the Greek mythology is a devilish persona, but most of the people do not know the actual story behind it. Medusa was raped by Poseidon in Athena's temple. Athena cursed her instead of Poseidon, as if it was all her fault. The myth of Medusa is very much similar to the story of Bulbul. Bulbul was brutally raped by the brother of her husband. Her sister-in-law suggested her to remain silent and accept that misfortune. There was a particular scene where her sister-in-law Binodini was cleaning and rubbing her body with a soft towel and washing bloods with the help of the warm water. While doing this, she said, ठाकुरों के यहाँ रिश्ता हुआ है, कैसा रोना धोना, चुप रहना, थोड़ा पागल है पर गहने मिलेंगे, थोड़ा पागल है पर रेशम मिलेगा, इज्जत मिलेगी, चुप रहना. By giving her this kind of advice, Binodini actually cursed Bulbul indirectly instead of helping her to protest. There is another reference to a fictional character, Maleficent. She was considered to be an evil in spite of being betrayed by Aurora's father, who chose the throne over her. Maleficent fulfilled her revenge after she snatched baby Aurora from her parents. She cursed Aurora from the state of her wrath, but after some years, she realized her mistake. She protected her from every danger and became Aurora's godmother. In Bulbul, Bulbul also showered her wrath upon the torturers by killing them, but she protected every victim from danger. Thus, she became Kalima to those victims. Though these two characters have no similarities, they are relatable to the character of Bulbul. Now, here comes the acts of the society from ancient age to modern. Since the ancient period, society has a tendency to punish witches. History says that in the medieval period, Joan of Arc was accused of practicing witchcraft. She was burned to death, though she was a warrior and fought a long battle. In 1920, she was canonized and became saint. Society couldn't accept her dressing senses, courageous, and last but not the least, her mindset that had hurt the male ego of the society. During the time of 1692, Bridget Bishop was put to death for witchcraft. That year, a number of people were executed during witch trials along with the Bridget Bishop.
Sanchita, you have 1 minute left.
Okay,
Please conclude.
Then I skip some quotes. Through our article, one can get the conception that not only females, but also males were accused of being witches. In Elizabethan era, superstition had reached a height. Practicing black magic was famous at that time. People started to believe ghosts, witches more and more. And this article, Beliefs and Superstition, has pointed out certain things during the time of Shakespeare. And I have to skip this because I am running out of time. So, next part, Shakespeare's Macbeth is the best example of Elizabethan beliefs regarding witches. In this particular text, witches are portrayed as dove creatures, often mislead people through their ridiculous predictions. Through the history, one can get clear notions about the gruesome act done by the society. Society always misleads others by giving false conceptions and tortures innocent people without any particular reason. In the movie Bulbul, perception of the society about witches is clearly visible. When Satya, younger brother of Bulbul's husband Indranil, came his native land after a long period, he got aware of a witch from his coachman on the way. After returning home, he immediately planned to search and hunt the witch. He tried to catch the witch red-handed, but he failed. At last, he burned the trees in order to warn the witch. After knowing the actual identity of the so-called witch, he burst into tears. Satya was extremely misguided by the prejudices of the society. For that reason, in spite of being highly educated, he didn't verify the truth. There was a scene where Satya expressed his doubt on Bulbul, and Bulbul answered him through a single sentence. In a lower tone, she said, "Tum sab ek jaise ho." You all are the same. Satya changed his mindset after hearing what was happened to Bulbul and left the house
Sanchita, please conclude.
Okay. And left the house with pain and horror. Now I'm moving towards the conclusion. That is 1 minute. In the concluding part, a brief discussion about the current situation of India can be included, along with the acts of the society. In India, due to the false conception, Dalits are forced to burn alive every year. In many rural areas, people from the lower class are considered as witches to the eyes of the society. Females are raped before going into the fire, and males are tortured mercilessly. Bulbul is a story of freedom. The name of this movie itself signifies that. The word Bulbul comes from the name of the bird, nightingale. In this movie, Bulbul wanted to be free like a bird, but society caged her and labeled her as a witch. Bulbul doesn't possess the traditional concept of witch, though she is a witch from the perspectives of the society. In reality, she is somewhat extraordinary. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanchita. That has really been an interesting session, but we didn't have much time. So now I would like to request Sanghita Chakraborty, student of MA in English in the West Bengal State University. Please present her paper, and her topic is Women and Weakness. Sanghita Chakraborty, are you there?
Hello, sir. Hello.
Yes, you're
Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible. Please start your presentation.
Hello. Yes. Good evening, sir, and everyone present there. My topic is women and weakness. Now, my topic covers the position of women and women's subordination in present society, present Indian society. Okay. I would like to start quoting Simon de Beauvoir, a very hard-hitting quote. Her wings are cut, and then she is blamed for not knowing how to fly. There's a similarity that can be drawn from the Rock quotation. Women are made weak by the patriarchal norms, and then they are blamed for their weakness. Women and weakness, these two terms are considered to be well laden with each other for ages long. And the concept is still foregoing in the present age of 21st century. Though there has been a progression in the forlorn condition of women through age-long struggle, but the notions of patriarchy still persist. Men have always suffered from insecurity, and patriarchy is its outcome. They have feared the power that women could possess, and to the extent she can go, and therefore have always tried to keep them under their control by imposing certain norms on them. The woman is born only to take care of males, perform his household duties, take care of his parents, and later his children, and then fulfill all his nightly needs. She is meant to perform all the rites and rituals for the long and healthy life of her husband and her children. In many literary works, the pangs of Indian female are painted in black and white. They had no colors, and even the virtual color faded away once she lost her husband, either by death or by any unfair means. Darkness of illiteracy has caused women to drown themselves in the sea of superstitions and to give up their control to the male authority. Today, women have challenged men by showing their excellence in all fields equally, but darkness is still there in society among many women who are bound by the shackles of superstitions. There are still found some evidences where the concept of Pati Param Guru is still followed by the women, and they are taken for granted. Today also the brides burn in the fire of dowry in many quote-unquote educated families. The question that wonders, are not women their own enemies? Do they not always impose the things they face on the new generation? There is an age-old conception which says that girls are destined to suffer. And unfortunately, this idea still persists in the present Indian society. But has it ever been questioned who makes them suffer? It is the patricentric society where women are undervalued and subjugated. The violence against women is the result of gender relations that assumed men to be more superior to women. Their voices are suppressed by the patriarchy. The family socializes its member to accept the hierarchical division between sexes and make a clear division of labor between both the sexes and power over the allocation of resources. Since the time immemorial, women have been suffering under this male domination. Even the great philosophers like Plato and Aristotle considered women to be weak and inferior to men. They are considered as an object of love and lust who should be bereft of any feelings and sentiments. Simon de Beauvoir comments, while it is natural for humans to understand themselves in opposition to others, this process is flawed when applied to genders. In defining woman excessively as other, man is effectively denying her humanity. This paper analysis projects condition of women in different historical phases and how it has underwent a change with the passage of time. It also brings to the forefront the improved status of women in modern India and how they are still treated in some respects in the same old manners in the contemporary Indian society. Their voices of sufferings have been reflected in the literature of the period from time to time. Women themselves fail to come out of the patriarchal norms that are imposed on them. Though lots of new policies have come, yet awareness is still needed in several corners. Women in ancient India. Though ancient Greek historical records give a miserable image of women, yet turning pages of Indian history back to the early Vedic era, a glorious image of women of that period comes to the surface. They enjoyed an equal and respectable position as that of men, and the society had the touch of matriarchy. Girls were brought up in the same manner as boys, and they had the full freedom. They were considered as an embodiment of beauty, culture, peace, and wisdom. The early Vedic era witnessed some well-known scholars, poets, spiritual saints who are still alive in gold-plated names in the pages of history.
You have 2 minutes left.
Gargi, Moitri were noted scholars, and Vag, Saraswati, Ramasa, Ghosha, Apala, etc. were poets whose verses were incorporated in Vedas and Puranas. In the later Vedic age, position of women declined with the rise of Brahmins, who disintegrated the society based on the class, caste, and gender. Men established themselves as the masters of society. Education becomes their enabling to write them shastras according to their benefits. Hence, writings thrust a great blow to the position of Indian women. Now, the pre-independent women in pre-dependent India, when the British came and annexed our country, the social evils like child marriage, sati, widowhood became even more prevalent. It was during the British rule some social reformers like Raja Ram Mohan Roy and Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar emerged to fight for the cause of women. Thus, these voices of revolt brought about a new awareness protesting against women's subordination. Bankim Chandra Chatterjee, Rabindranath Tagore, some literary figures like this, they projected women's sufferings and not only sufferings, they projected women in the way they were fighting against these patriarchal norms. They portrayed strong women characters who are fighting for this subordination and the torture done to them. But in post-independent era, when there has been a radical social and political change, the idea of feminism have even become very much strong. But still, women are not independent, are not at all can live according to their own free will in present Indian society. There is still also some old traditions that are prevalent till date. There is parda system, and there is also practice of sati or child marriage in remote areas that never comes to the surface. Today also women are raped, harassed and molested in families or in workplaces. Today also, as we look around us, such instances are seen as common phenomena pervading the society. With these questions, I would like to quote Simon de Beauvoir, who has asked that
Please
women
conclude.
herself, yes, yes. The women herself recognizes that the universe as a whole is masculine. It is men who have shaped it, ruled it, and who still today dominate it. As the time is short, I cannot uh, uh, give the examples of the literary figures. Literary figures like Kamala Dash and Anita Desai, they have written feminist novels and portrayed their sufferings, so women's sufferings, very much in their stories and novels, which are reflected in their some of the poems and novels. And as I come to the conclusion,
Ma'am, please conclude.
yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. There has been a technical error, sir. Just give me a few seconds, sir.
Sure.
Yes, an eminent historian and activist, Credis Cramere, once famously remarked that feminism is a radical notion that women are human beings. Based on Freudian concept, psychoanalytic feminism theorizes that gender is not biological but is based on psychosexual development of the individual, which led men to believe as masculine and women believe themselves as feminine. Though waves of feminism has brought to the forefront all these theories and proved to be successful in its attempt to bring about a social change to free women from the shackles and grip of male-dominated society, the darkness is still pervading, which silently bursts inside. Women are still forced to live in a hostile environment. They are neglected and their values are denied in many families. Marriages still prove to be nightmares for many girls, and end result turns out to be either death or divorce. The age-old traditions and superstitions are still imposed on them for making them weak, timid, and dependable. In typical Indian tradition, it is a woman who victimizes another woman instead of looking for emancipation. Women are still remaining object of exchange between both the families. The perception that women are second to men has not been erased totally. With the enforcement of women's rights, there has also been a mushroom growth of crime against women within and outside families, trying to make them even weak to raise their heads with honor. Women are yet to fight against the hindrances to bring about a mutation in the existing social norms that devalues the women. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Shangita Chakraborty, for your presentation.
Yes, it
Actually, we
is
are
short.
running.
Yes,
Actually, we
I
are.
was running out of time. I couldn't quote some eminent literary
Okay,
figures.
doesn't matter. Thank you. Thank you so
Mm,
much.
thank you, sir.
Now, I would like to request Sahin Fatma, a research scholar, to please come and present her paper. Sahin Fatma. She'll be talking on understanding Black women identity within the paradigm of race and gender. Zora Neale Hurston's Their Eyes Were Watching God. Salima Fatma, over
Good
to you.
evening, sir. Good evening, sir.
Yes.
I hope
Good
I'm
evening.
visible and I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you are visible and audible as well. You can
Okay,
start your
sir.
presentation.
Okay, sir. My topic is understanding Black women identity within the paradigm of race and gender. Zurani Huston, The Eyes of Watching God. Huston, in her most creative venture, has voiced the Black dignity and self-esteem. Though race and racism is the dominant feature of her writing, what looms large is the turmoil and suffering of Black women, oppressed within the patriarchal prejudice and a struggle for assertion and self-fulfillment. According to Baines, as the greatest impediment in man-woman relationship is sexism. Over decades, the writing and literature of Africa was invisible to the world, and especially the identity of women was shadowed with traditional canon that prescribed literary excellence prejudiced on the basis of biasness against women. The Eyes of Watching God is true reflection of post-colonial literature. Here, the protagonist of the story is female character Janie Crawford, and her expedition from suppression to self-assertion marks the main plot. She had spent her formative years with children from white family, unaware of the discriminatory color boundaries set by the prevalent partial society. Her journey to self-awareness starts with a group photograph with the white children where she identifies herself as colored and so other and so different. Here, I would like to quote a few lines from her novel, Her Eyes Were Watching God. So when we looked at the picture and everybody got pointed out, there wasn't nobody left except a real dark little girl with long stranding hair by Eleanor. That's where I was supposed to be. But I could not recognize that dark little child was me. Oh, so that's where is me? I don't see me. So with this, we come to know that clear, distinct demarcation between white and black was prevalent from the very ages. The novel throws light on the discrimination of white Americans who felt that white reflect culture, civilization, whereas black reflect uncivilized, uncultured, and so bound to be downtrodden. Bound to be downtrodden. The concept of colonizer and colonized is also a dominant theme in this novel to denote the concept of master and slave. Jenny's husband always tried to degree her and dominate her on account of patriarchy and colonial ideology, where male reflect transcendental image of creativity, whereas earthbound images reflect those of females. Then this enhances the suffering of black women due to the concept of double marginalization. Feminism and post-colonial studies are interlinked, as both these terms highlight ill treatment and suppression borne by females, especially in African American countries, where status of women is no less than a mule. The Eyes of Watching God depicts the body urge with implanted desire of a niggard woman to love and to be loved. The realization of her sexual self is at the age of 16, when she compares herself to a blossoming tree. The pollination and proliferation of the tree depicts man-woman relationship and the act of procreation. According to Lerner in 1989, patriarchal dominance and oppression owing to discrimination was based on gender and race and was prevalent almost 2,500 years back. Freedom and independence of women was unappreciated even in the reign of Victoria and Rye. Black woman was a symbolic representation of exploitation and mistreatment by men inside as well as outside, undergoing huge turmoil and oppression due to double marginalization. According to Maria Rodolfi, marriage oppresses women's mind and bodies, victimizes her from rising to the fullest. So it is an androcentric society full of dominance by males. Jenny, the protagonist of the story, Her Eyes Were Watching God, married 3 times And in each time of a marriage, she underwent violence and trauma at different forms and at different levels. Her emotion with different partners are portrayed by symbolic representation depicting love and resistance. Her unbounded fight and household chores, her battling with a partner for inquisitorial demands, show that she was treated no less than an other. Her existence was no less than a mule. Nanny felt that she and her daughter were victims to sexual exploitation only because they lacked the shield of marriage. Jenny, that looked light through Nanny's eyes, also believed that marriage was inevitable for survival for all black women. Nanny was exploited at the plantation by the hands of white master, whereas her daughter was raped by a black schoolmaster, by the black school teacher. This degrading position had to be willingly accepted by the black woman as a natural outcome of remaining unmarried, and to protect Jenny from this vulnerable cat, Nanny feels marriage is the only rescue from being an easy prey to the men folk, white and black. Jenny's exploration of her own self-desire urges her to yield to Johnny Taylor and permit him to kiss her. This act of love-making before marriage was disapproved by Nanny, as virtuous women suppress these desires in order to sit on the pedestal of morally richest women. This is by Hawkes. It's a quotation by Hawkes. And Logan Killick's a match. Jenny eventually marries Logan Killick's, a man much older to her in age and accepted due to financial stability. Logan expects Jenny to be indebted to him and exercises power to control her, resulting in domestic violence.
Ma'am, you have 2 minutes.
This patriarchal mindset blinds him to a point where his concentration in maintaining farm is far more than sustaining marital status. And are troubled by Killick's, Jenny leaves her Joe Stark with renewed vision of hope and positivity. Joe Stark, who is the mayor, wants Jenny to realize the sudden difference in status from Jenny to Mrs. Mayor Starks. He wanted to oblige him. He wanted her to oblige him with the difference he had brought in socioeconomic condition by liberating him from the clutches of Killicks. And at the outset, he was pouring all love and honor, whereas at home she was devoid of even basic rights that a female needs. And when Joe, he uses power and position public and private level to replicate supremacy. When Joe physically abuses Jenny by hitting her on cooking and be a bad meal, she resists. And because she doesn't have any other option. Prejudice due to racial dogma is prevalent not only due to racial discrimination, but also due to prejudiced menaces holding members of identical race. And Joe and John Clicks both stand as a symbolic representation of the community of Black. Her first 2 marriages is nothing but a farce, and finally, with the death of Joe, she elopes with Tea Cake to lead a life of self-fulfillment. Her love for Tea Cake is naturally bountiful, and in this relationship, Jen is no longer alienated, but finds herself. And just to conclude, Huston, through her novels, has explored the factual spirit of a woman by giving prominence to the invisible I, extremely visible in the later part of novel. Patriarchal ideology in the society leads to male autonomy on one hand and subjugation of females on the other. Though race and racism is the central theme of novel of Huston, her writing has revealed the evil practices prevalent even within her race. To quote, Mrs. Turner, a light-skinned woman, looks down upon people of her own community due to darker complexion. She also tries to sow seed of discrimination between Jenny and her man due to segregation based on inter-racial prejudice. However, the abound love and respect surpasses all these inter- and intra-racial boundaries. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Your paper has really been an enriching one, and you have portrayed the double operation on Black women in a very wonderful way, and we are really impressed by your paper. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Next, I would like to invite Sathisan S., doctoral research scholar of Department of English, Sri Venkateshwara University, and her topic and the topic is ethno-social dynamics in post-colonial novels. Sathisan S., are you there? Sathisan S., are you there?
No, sir, she is not there. We'll move
Okay.
on to the next person.
So I would like to invite Sharmila Jajoria, Professor Sharmila Jajoria, Assistant Professor at the Department of English,
Hello.
Ramniranjan Bhujanwala College, Mumbai.
Hello.
Hello.
Good evening,
Ma'am,
sir. Good
good
evening,
evening, ma'am.
everyone.
Good evening, ma'am.
Yeah.
You're audible. Please start
Yeah.
your paper.
Yeah.
She will be talking on Dalit marginality and literature, an overview. Ma'am, please start your paper.
Yeah.
Please start your presentation.
Yeah. Dalits are at the margins and are struggling for equity in society. Their literary works is getting reflection about whatever they are facing. Dalits have been experiencing unspeakable and unimaginable torments since time immemorial throughout the globe, despite socio-cultural, educational, scientific advancement and globalization. The destiny of Dalit has remained almost static without much perceptible changes. The unchanging mindset of the exploitators, chained by stagnant thinking, hypocritical psyche, and deep-rooted social convention is responsible for this. Dalits marginalization is getting its expression in its various facets in almost all languages simultaneously through their continual protest, rebellion, and revolution, through literary and non-literary movements to liberate themselves from the oncoming social slavery. In every age, social reformers like Jyotiba Phule, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, and many others, literators like Gangadhar Pantavne, Daya Pawar, and many others, tried to emancipate and empower them. They have made them conscious of their disgrace, status, movements, and creative production couldn't do much in eliminating this chronic evil. The causes are lack of resources, illiteracy, poverty, and multiple socio-political and cultural factors. The literary transcription is a barefaced, servile imitation of their deprived life. Assertions of Dalits. Dalits have denied the existence of God, rebirth, karma, holy books, teaching separatism, fate, and heaven, the causes of their slavishness. They started asserting humanism and self-identity through symbolic variations, intellectual means, and movements, questioning the politics of silence. Government's reformative policies, socio-cultural, educational, and service safeguards provided in the constitutional provisions, though help them to upgrade themselves, but Dalits' vision of creating a world without exploitation remains an unfulfilled dream. They remain Dalit socially, culturally, economically, vocationally, geographically, politically, and legally. As we can see, the way Dalits are abused almost every day at various facets of life. I have chosen two works for my paper. Annabhav Sathe's Take a Hammer to Change the World, translated by Gail Omwit and Bharat Patankar. Take a hammer to change the world, so saying went Bhim Rao, why the elephant is stuck sitting in the mud of slavery. Shake your body and come out, take a leap to the forefront. The rich have exploited us without end. The priests have tortured us as if had eaten jewels, and thieves had become great, sitting on the chariot of unity. Let us go forward to break the chains of class and caste hold to the name of Bhim. In this poem, Annabhau Sathe is trying to instigate the Dalits to take a hammer to change the world, to be revolutionary and follow Dr. Dr. Baba Sahib Ambedkar, as he is saying that the elephant is stuck sitting in the mud of slavery. They have been enslaved since time immemorial, so now they have to come out and take a leap to the forefront. They need to be at the forefront of their revolution because rich have been exploiting them. The priests have also exploited in the name of religion, and the thieves have become great, sitting on the chariot of unity. Means all these people from upper caste are like thieves who are sitting on the chariot of, they are united, and so Dalits also need to be united, and they need to come forward to break the chain of class and caste, and they need to follow Baba Sahib Ambedkar. The second work which I have chosen is Vaman Howell's The Storied House. This is the story of a coolie, Bayaji, who joins the service as a coolie and retires as a supervisor. After his retirement, he comes to his native place with his meager saving of 2,500 rupees. When he returns to his home, his children ask him what he has brought for them. He says, "Look, children, ours is such a large family. Even at meal time, we have to eat by turns or sit crowded, knocking our knees together, and wish to build a house out of my earnings. And it has to be a storied house. The usual 3-portion house won't be adequate for us." But his plan of building a 3-storied house is not liked by people from upper caste in his village. One day, Bayaji saw Kondiba Patil coming towards him and greeted him. "It is with your blessings that I have ventured on this storied house." The way he reacts, "Baiju, you shouldn't lose your head simply because you have set aside some money. Do you aspire to an equal status with us by building this house? The poor should remain content with their cottage. Understand?" Kondiba remarked rather sharply. "No, Patil, please don't misunderstand me." Bayaji was a little dizzy with nervousness. "How do you say that one should keep to one's position? You shouldn't let a little money turn your head." He replied, "I only wish to build shelter for my family. Then I shall be free to breathe my last." "Who said you shouldn't have a house? You can have a small house with 3 convenient portions, a veranda in the front, and at the living section in the middle. Why spend unnecessarily on a storied house?" Patil gave his counsel. "No," but Bayaji faltered. "You may go in for a storied house only if you don't wish to stay in this village. I hope you know what I mean," Kondiba shot out. Then Bayaji organized a ceremony for his house, inaugural ceremony for his house, when the 3-storied
Ma'am, you have
house.
1.5 minutes left.
Yeah. They eyed one another as if to say, "This untouchable worm has got a swollen head. He needs proper handling." Bayaji was frantic. He ran around crying, "My house, my storied house, it's on fire. My enemy had taken revenge on me." When he invited people from upper class to attend the inaugural ceremony, his house was set on fire. Scorched in flames, Bayaji ran around like a trapped creature, howling all the time, "My house, my house, my house. Sons, I want to build a storied house. I have no other wish." He died. The eldest son was digging. The second was gathering the earth with his spade, and the others were lifting it away in baskets. The guests asked in amazement, "Children, you are in mourning? What is this you are doing?" "We are starting on a house, not one with a concealed first floor, but a regular 2-storied house," replied the eldest son of Bayaji, and the 6 brothers resumed with determination the work of digging the foundation of a 2-storied house. So see, a Dalit can't have a house according to his wish and desire out of his own earned money. This is what is happening to Dalits every day. Thus, Dalit literature is not necessarily a literary exercise, but a social intervention with strong militant connotation of varying nature in all languages. Dalit literature is accused of obsession with self and revolt without any action. The contribution of Dalit literature has been immense in development paradigms and socio-political awakenings. At present, the Dalit literary movement may not be much strong everywhere, but nowhere is it feeble enough to be ignored. Thank you all. These are my
Thank you,
references.
Professor. Thank you, Professor Jajoria, for your wonderful paper. And I hope there are no more participants left.
Sir, can you please name the participants who are missing from the beginning?
Just a minute. Rinkita, just let me know whether they have spoken or not.
Okay.
Pousali Sarkar.
Just a minute, sir.
Pousali
No,
Sarkar.
she is not there.
Priyadarshini Sengupta. Spoken.
She's done. She's done.
Rajiv Yadav.
No, she's not there.
Rajiv Yadav is not there. Rajesh Das.
She is done. Renu Singh is also done. Rima Bera.
Rima Bera. Is Rima Bera present?
No, sir.
Okay. So I don't think anybody is left for the session.
No, sir. Nobody is left.
Okay. So thank you so much. Thank you. I would like to thank all the participants who have participated in this event, in this webinar. And it's really a pleasure to hear you all. And it has been an enriching session. So now I would like to transfer my chair to Dr. Srijanee Roy. Ma'am, are you there?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Professor Banerjee, for chairing the session for the last 8 speakers. I was right here, and it was really interesting to listen to so many, readings, which kind of encompasses so many different areas. And I must mention that Professor Shagnik Banerjee's paper was very visually stimulating, and it presented a very unique way of looking into this very precarious position of the Bengali Bhadralok, who doesn't really know whether he is marginalized or not. And even as he dealt with the so-called the picture of marginalization as it is presented of the urban space. I must also mention that it is a very interesting prospect that popular culture has been read into so deeply. Like there has been a paper on Haider, there has been a paper on this Netflix movie of Bulbul. And so we can understand that this very concept of marginalization and the voice of resistance and resilience as it comes across has permeated not only the literary surfaces, but it has ingrained deep into a lot of other cultural artifacts. So it has been a very enriching session. Thank you, everyone. I am sure that I don't see any questions coming in, so I presume that we can call it a day. Thank you, Professor Debdeep Banerjee. Thank you all the presenters who have been there right from the beginning. Thank you, Rinkita Saha, for being such a wonderful coordinator. So we'll call it a day. Bye-bye.
Okay. So thank you for your active participations. We have a wonderful intellectual presentation today, and thank you very much for enlightening us and motivating us with your wonderful perspectives. I would like to extend my gratitude to all of them for whom arranging this truly historical yet international webinar has been possible. I would like to thank the Honorable Principal of Rishi Bankim Chandra Day College, Dr. Sanjeev Kumar Saha, for supporting us and helping us to hold this webinar. I would like to thank the chairpersons of today's session, Dr. Srijanee Roy and Professor Debdeep Banerjee, without whose guidance this session would not have been this smooth. I thank all the eminent speakers for their cooperation and patience as well. Without your active participation, the webinar would have been meaningless. Last But not the least, I would like to thank Dr. Shubhabrot Sarkar, Associate Professor of Department of English of Rishi Bankim Chandra College, without whose inspiration, guidance, support, and belief, nothing would have been possible. I once again thank you all, and here we have come to the end of our webinar. Thank you very much.